I want to state, for the record, that I considered myself a rational person when I accepted the posting. Former Air Force, honorably discharged, technically. The psychological evaluation after Kandahar had been thorough, clinical, and ultimately damning in its professional courtesy. Acute stress reaction, they'd called it, recommended for non-combat assignment. What they meant was, we don't trust you around other people anymore. The private security contractor didn't ask questions. 6-month solo posting, monitoring a decommissioned Minuteman III facility outside Minot, North Dakota. The pay was generous enough to silence my few remaining concerns. I told myself it was a fresh start, solitude, time to sort through the noise in my head without anyone watching. I arrived on November 19th. The landscape was exactly as desolate as I'd imagined, perhaps more so. Frozen plains stretched to every horizon, broken only by the occasional skeletal tree and the geometric brutality of the facility itself. The surface structures were standard Cold War architecture. Reinforced concrete, narrow windows, that particular shade of institutional beige that spoke of 1960s military pragmatism. The wind was constant, a living thing that found every gap in my clothing and howled through the exposed pipework with sounds that were almost vocal. Patricia met me at the security gate. Late 50s, iron-gray hair pulled back severely. The kind of face that suggested she'd spent decades refusing to suffer fools. She handed me a badge, 3 sets of keys, and a laminated sheet of paper. "The rules," she said without preamble. I looked down at the document, 23 numbered entries in small, precise type. The lamination was worn at the edges, suggesting it had been handled many times by many hands. "Never respond to knocking from inside the silo after 10 p.m., I read aloud. "If you hear the launch klaxon, do not investigate its source. Never descend below level 3 alone." I laughed. It was a nervous sound, swallowed quickly by the wind. "This is a joke, right? Hazing the new guy?" Patricia's expression didn't change. "The facility has been officially decommissioned since 1997. All missile systems were removed and relocated. Your job is to monitor the structural integrity and ensure no unauthorized access. The rules exist for a reason. Previous contractors who disregarded them experienced difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" "Read the rules, Mr. Turchen. Follow them precisely. Your relief supervisor rotates in every 7 days. The rest of the time, you're alone." She handed me a satellite phone. "This works when cell service doesn't, which is most of the time. Questions?" I had dozens, but Patricia was already walking back to her truck, her boots crunching on frozen gravel. I spent the first hour exploring the surface level. The control station was a cramped room filled with monitoring equipment that looked like museum pieces. Chunky keyboards, monochrome screens, rows of switches with Cyrillic and English labels. Radiation detectors, seismic monitors, a ventilation control panel that hummed with inexplicable power despite Patricia's assurance that the facility was mostly offline. The blast door to the lower levels dominated the north wall. It was massive, 30 inches of reinforced steel, stenciled with faded warnings about authorized personnel and deadly force. Through its small observation window, I could see only darkness. I returned to the laminated rules, reading them more carefully now. Rule number 1, maintain constant monitoring of surface access points. Rule number 2, log all anomalous readings regardless of apparent cause. Rule number 3, never respond to knocking from inside the silo after 10 p.m. That one made me pause. Knocking. From inside a sealed, abandoned missile silo. Rule number 7, if the launch klaxon sounds, do not investigate. Remain in your quarters until it stops. Rule number 12, voices of loved ones are never who they claim to be. Rule number 19, If the launch sequence initiates, evacuate immediately. Do not attempt manual abort. I set the rules aside and told myself they were psychological artifacts. Cold War paranoia crystallized into bureaucratic superstition, the kind of thing that accumulates in isolated military installations, passed down and embellished with each rotation. I told myself this because the alternative, that these rules served a genuine purpose, was unacceptable. My quarters were Spartan. A narrow bed, a metal desk, a small bathroom with pipes that groaned when I ran the water. A single window looked out over the plains. As darkness fell, I realized I couldn't see a single artificial light in any direction. The isolation was total. I made coffee, tested the internet connection, barely functional, and settled in to read the facility's official documentation. Maintenance logs, structural reports, personnel records from decades of operation. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained rules about knocking or voices. At 9:47 p.m. I was reviewing a 1986 inspection report when the temperature in the control room dropped noticeably. I checked the thermostat, still set to 68 degrees, but the reading showed 61 and falling. At 10:47 p.m. I heard the knocking for the first time. 3 strikes against metal, deliberate, measured, then silence. I was in the control station halfway through a cup of coffee that had gone cold without my noticing. The sound was unmistakable, metal on metal, resonant coming from somewhere beyond the blast door. I set down my cup carefully, listening. The facility's ambient sounds continued. The hum of equipment, the whisper of ventilation, the groan of old infrastructure settling in the cold. But the knocking had been different, purposeful. 3 more strikes. Same rhythm, same source. I pulled up the surveillance system, cycling through the cameras that supposedly monitored the lower levels. The screens showed only static on levels 1 and 2, complete darkness on levels 3, 4, and 5. According to Patricia, most of the underground cameras had failed years ago, their maintenance deemed non-essential for a decommissioned facility. The knocking came again. Closer now, or perhaps just louder. Definitely coming from the other side of the blast door. I found myself standing, moving toward it without conscious decision. The observation window was at eye level, its thick glass scratched and yellowed with age. I pressed my face close, trying to see into the darkness beyond. Nothing. Just the landing at the top of the descending stairwell, illuminated weakly by a single emergency light that cast everything in shades of red. Rule number 3, never respond to knocking from inside the silo after 10 p.m. The laminated sheet was on the desk where I'd left it. I looked at it, then back at the blast door. The knocking had stopped, but in its absence I became aware of another sound. Faint, rhythmic, breathing. Someone was on the other side of the door, breathing in long, measured cycles. I could hear it clearly now, coming through the ventilation gaps around the massive hinges. My hand moved to the access panel beside the door. The mechanism was still functional, a keycard reader and a manual wheel lock. It would take 30 seconds to open, just to look, just to confirm there was nothing there, that this was some acoustic trick of the facility's architecture. My fingers touched the keycard in my pocket. The breathing on the other side of the door changed. It became faster, expectant. And beneath it I heard something else, a wet, sliding sound, like something heavy dragging across concrete. I stepped back from the door, my hands were shaking. I noticed this distantly, as though observing someone else's physical response. The breathing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than the sounds had been. It was expectant, patient. I retreated to my quarters, locked the door, and sat on my bed with the lights on, the laminated rules in my lap. I read rule number 3 again and again until the words lost meaning. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking resumed, 3 strikes, then 3 more, then silence. It continued at irregular intervals until dawn. I didn't sleep. In the morning light, with the sun turning the frozen plains into a glittering expanse that hurt to look at, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Auditory hallucinations brought on by isolation and residual combat stress. The breathing could have been the ventilation system, the knocking thermal expansion of metal in the extreme cold. Almost convinced myself. But when I checked the facility's environmental logs, I found something that erased my rationalizations. The temperature readings from the blast door's immediate vicinity showed a spike at exactly 10:47 p.m. Not a drop, as I would have expected from cold air infiltration, but a 30-degree increase in localized temperature, lasting exactly 17 minutes. Something on the other side of that door had been generating heat. Something had been alive. Jake arrived on my 8th day at the facility, and I knew immediately he would be a problem. He was younger than me, maybe 28, with the particular swagger that comes from never having encountered something his training and physical confidence couldn't handle. Ex-Marine, he told me within the first 5 minutes, deployed twice to Helmand Province private security work across 3 continents. He dropped the information casually, the way men do when they need you to know they're dangerous. I showed him the rules during the handoff. He skimmed them, smirked, and tossed the laminated sheet onto the desk. Psychological warfare bullshit. They used to do this at black sites, compliance testing disguised as safety protocols. See which contractors would follow arbitrary orders without questioning them. You think they're fake? I think they're designed to make you paranoid. Keep you on edge. Probably some asshole's idea of studying stress responses in isolation. He cracked open a beer from his duffel bag, violating rule number 8 before he'd been on site for an hour. No offense, man, but you look like you've been buying into it. When's the last time you slept? I didn't answer. The truth was I'd slept in brief, fractured intervals, jerking awake at every sound. The knocking had become a nightly occurrence, always starting at 10:47 p.m., always 3 measured strikes. I'd stopped approaching the blast door, stopped checking the cameras, but I couldn't stop hearing it. Jake settled in with the casual confidence of someone who believed he understood the world completely. He made dinner in the small kitchenette, some kind of pasta, while telling war stories I'd heard variations of 100 times. At 9:30 p.m., he suggested we play cards. I declined, retiring to my quarters with the excuse of an early departure. At 10:39 p.m., the facility's launch klaxon activated. The sound was unlike anything I'd experienced. It wasn't loud so much as penetrating. A Cold War-era wail designed to cut through concrete and steel to alert personnel across the entire facility that the unthinkable was happening. It oscillated between 2 tones, creating a dissonant harmony that set my teeth on edge and triggered something primal in my hindbrain. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the control room. Jake was already there, pulling on his boots, a flashlight in his hand. "What the fuck is that?" "Launch klaxon," I shouted over the wail. "We need to stay here. Rule number 7. Fuck the rules. Something triggered it. Could be an intruder, could be equipment malfunction. Either way, we need to check it out." He moved toward the blast door. I grabbed his arm. "Jake, listen to me. I've been here over a week. This place isn't... Something's wrong with it. The rules exist for a reason. We need to stay here until it stops." He shook me off, his expression caught between annoyance and concern. "Man, you need to get off this site. You're starting to lose it. I'm going down to level 2, checking the klaxon source and coming right back. 10 minutes tops." He swiped his keycard. The blast door's locks disengaged with a series of heavy thunks. The wheel lock spun and the massive door swung inward with a groan of stressed metal. The klaxon's wail intensified, funneling up from the depths of the facility. Jake clicked on his flashlight and started down the stairs. I followed him to the doorway but couldn't force myself to descend. Instead, I went back to the control station, cycling through the security cameras. Most showed only static, but camera 7, positioned on the level 2 landing, flickered to life. Jake appeared on screen, descending the corroded stairwell. The camera's angle showed the space behind him. Concrete walls slick with condensation, pipes running along the ceiling, emergency lighting casting everything in that familiar red glow. He reached level 2, sweeping his flashlight across the landing. The camera picked up his muttered commentary. "Nothing here. Just old equipment. Told you it was..." He stopped. His flashlight beam had caught something at the far end of the corridor. A figure standing absolutely motionless in the darkness beyond the emergency light's reach. It was wearing an Air Force uniform, the style from decades past. Service dress blues that looked almost black in the dim light. Jake approached slowly. "Hey! This is a restricted facility. Identify yourself." The figure didn't respond, didn't move. Jake got within 10 feet. "I said identify yourself. Who authorized you to..." The figure's head rotated. Not the body, just the head. It turned a full 180 degrees with a sound like breaking ice until it was facing backward, looking directly at Jake with eyes that reflected the flashlight beam like an animal's. The camera feed exploded into static. Jake's flashlight clattered across the floor on screen, its beam spinning wildly. Then the camera showed only an empty corridor, the flashlight rolling to a stop against the far wall. And then I heard Jake screaming. It came through the ventilation system, through the open blast door, echoing up from the depths of the facility. Not words, just raw, primal terror given voice. It went on, escalating in pitch and desperation. I stood frozen in the control room, every instinct warring between the need to help him and the deeper, older instinct that told me going down there meant death. The screaming continued for 2 hours and 43 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, unable to do anything else, as Jake's voice grew hoarse, then ragged, then faded to nothing. When the klaxon finally stopped at 1:22 a.m., the silence was absolute. I approached the blast door on shaking legs. The stairwell descended into darkness. I called Jake's name. No response. I descended 3 steps, just 3, far enough to see the landing below. Jake's flashlight was there, lying on its side, its beam illuminating a patch of concrete floor. The light was covered in frost, despite the facility's heated interior. Around it, I could see drag marks in the condensation leading deeper into level 2. But no Jake, no body, no blood. Just those drag marks and the frost and the absolute certainty that if I descended one more step, I would join him in whatever had happened down there. I retreated, sealed the blast door, and spent the rest of the night in my quarters with every light on, the satellite phone in my hand, trying to decide if calling Patricia would accomplish anything beyond confirming that I'd lost my mind. At dawn, I forced myself to check the stairwell again. Jake's flashlight was still there, clearly visible from the doorway. I used the emergency retrieval pole, a long aluminum implement designed for recovering dropped equipment, to fish it out. The flashlight was so cold it burned my hand. The metal was covered in a thin layer of frost that shouldn't have been possible in the facility's controlled environment. I called Patricia at 7:00 a.m. She listened to my report in silence, then told me she'd send a search team within 48 hours. Weather was complicating travel, she said. Stay in my quarters. Don't go below level 1. Follow the rules. Jake's body was found 3 days later, 3 miles from the facility, half buried in a snowdrift. The official report said exposure, but I saw the coroner's preliminary notes before they were classified. Multiple fractures consistent with a fall from significant height. severe hypothermia despite being found within hours of death. And something else, redacted in the final report, his body temperature at discovery was 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees below what should have been possible. Jake had been refrigerated from the inside out. I should have left after Jake. Any rational person would have. But Patricia offered me a substantial bonus to complete the rotation, and more importantly, she fast-tracked my replacement's arrival. Just 3 more weeks, she said, maybe 4. The way she said it suggested she didn't expect me to last that long. I stayed, though I'm still not certain why. Perhaps because leaving felt like admitting defeat. Perhaps because some part of me needed to understand what had happened to Jake, what had been knocking on that door every night at 10:47 p.m. Or perhaps I simply had nowhere else to go. No one waiting for me. No life to return to that hadn't already been dismantled by my own failing mental state. I began investigating the facility's history in earnest. The administrative level, Level 1, just below the surface control station, contained decades of accumulated records. Filing cabinets lined the corridors, stuffed with paperwork that no one had bothered to digitize or destroy when the facility was decommissioned. Most of it was mundane: maintenance schedules, supply requisitions, personnel evaluations, the bureaucratic detritus of Cold War military operations. But in a cabinet marked Personnel Archived, I found something that made my hands stop shaking and start sweating instead. A logbook, leather-bound, water-stained. The entries ran from January 1983 to March 1984. Handwritten entries in multiple scripts, all following the same clinical format. Date: 14 FEB 1983 incident. TSG William Morrison failed to report for duty rotation. Last seen 0200 hours, descending to level 4 to investigate unusual sounds. Resolution: remains recovered 72 hours later at bottom of missile tube. Cause of death: trauma consistent with fall. Facial expression noted as severe by recovery team. Hands worn to bone, consistent with sustained contact with concrete surfaces. Note: TSG Morrison descended alone. Rule number 5 violation confirmed. Date: 09 May 1983. Incident: A1C Jennifer Holbrook responded to voice identification through intercom system, claiming to hear her daughter requesting assistance from level 3. Security footage shows Holbrook bypassing safety protocols to access sealed maintenance shaft. Resolution: body recovered 16 hours later. Cause of death: asphyxiation. Holbrook became wedged in ventilation shaft despite shaft diameter being inadequate for human passage. Unknown how entry was achieved. Note: Holbrook's daughter deceased since 1979. Rule number 12 violation confirmed. There were 11 entries total. 11 personnel all disappeared or died under circumstances that the clinical language couldn't quite render rational. Each incident followed a rule violation. Each resolution involved remains found in places they shouldn't have been, in conditions that defied explanation. The final entry was dated March 17, 1984. Date: 17 Mar 1984. Incident: facility lockdown initiated following multiple simultaneous breaches. 6 personnel unaccounted for. Level 6 to 9 compromised. Emergency sealing procedures authorized. Resolution: survivors 3 evacuated. Lower levels filled with concrete. Reclassified as levels 6-9 biological hazard, do not breach. Personnel reassigned. Facility operations suspended pending investigation. Note: investigation suspended indefinitely per classified order. Facility redesignated for monitoring only. Rules protocol implemented for all future personnel. I found the architectural schematics in the same cabinet. The official facility diagrams showed 5 levels descending from the surface: control station, administrative level, technical level, missile operations, and the missile tube itself. Standard configuration for a Minuteman III site. but someone had paperclipped an older schematic to the back of the official document. This one showed 9 levels. The additional 4 were labeled simply Level 6, Excavation, Level 7, Research, Level 8, Containment, Level 9, Illegible. The lower 4 levels had been hand-marked with red ink. Sealed 03-1784, Unauthorized Access Prohibited. I spent 2 days absorbing this information, trying to construct a rational framework that could contain it. The facility had clearly been more than a missile silo. Some kind of research installation, perhaps connected to one of the Cold War's black budget programs. The disappearances were tragic but explainable. Paranoia, equipment failures, the psychological toll of extended underground deployment. But that framework shattered on my 15th night at the facility. I was in my quarters at 11:34 p.m., reviewing the personnel log again when I heard my ex-wife's voice. It came through the ventilation grate above my bed. Clear, unmistakable, laden with the particular tone she used when she was worried about me. Marcus, honey, are you there? I stood up slowly, looking at the grate. The voice was so perfectly her. The slight Texas drawl she'd never quite lost, the way she softened the second syllable of my name. Marcus, I need you to listen to me. Emily's been in an accident. She's at the hospital. She's asking for you. You need to come home right now. Emily, our daughter's name. Except we didn't have a daughter. We talked about children years ago before the deployments became constant and the marriage began its slow collapse. But we'd never had a child. The voice knew this. It was using a daughter who had never existed, a memory that felt real despite its impossibility. And in that moment, I realized something that turned my blood to ice. The memories were real. I could see Emily clearly. Her 3rd birthday party, the purple dinosaur cake, her laugh when I pushed her on the swing set behind our house in Colorado Springs. I could remember her birth, holding her for the first time, the weight of her in my arms. But these memories were being written in real time, manufactured and inserted as I stood there, watching them bloom in my mind like poisonous flowers. Marcus, please. She's hurt badly. She needs her father. Come down to level 5. There's a phone line there. You can call the hospital, but you need to come now. Rule number 12. Voices of loved ones are never who they claim to be. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I pulled up my contact list, found my ex-wife's number, her real number confirmed by the existence of years of text message history. I called. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice groggy with sleep. Marcus? Jesus, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? Do we have a daughter? Silence, then. What? No. Marcus, are you okay? Are you using again? Do we have a daughter named Emily? No. We don't have any children, you know that. Marcus, what's happening? Where are you? I hung up. The manufactured memories were already fading, crumbling like old photographs, leaving only the residue of their emotional impact. The certainty I'd felt about Emily's existence evaporated, replaced by the cold knowledge that something had reached into my mind and planted false memories with such precision that I'd believed them completely. The voice from the ventilation grate spoke again, but now it had changed. It was still my ex-wife's voice, but wrong, the pitch slightly off, the cadence too measured. Come down, Marcus, she's waiting, they're all waiting, come down to where you belong. I grabbed the laminated rules, pressing them against my chest like a talisman. The lights in my quarters flickered once, twice, then died completely. In the darkness, I heard movement in the ventilation system. Not the random pops and groans of thermal expansion, but deliberate, purposeful movement. Something pulling itself through the ductwork. I ran. I made it to the control station, slamming the door behind me and engaging the lock. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The blast door to the lower levels was closed secure, but through its observation window I could see movement in the darkness beyond. Figures. Multiple figures standing motionless on the landing wearing outdated uniforms. Their heads were turned at impossible angles. Their eyes reflected the red emergency light, and all of them were looking at me. I checked my phone. No signal, as expected. But when I opened the Photos app to ground myself in reality, I found images I'd never taken. Pictures of a little girl with my features and my ex-wife's smile. Emily at the beach. Emily at her kindergarten graduation. Emily in a hospital bed, her body broken, her eyes accusing. I deleted them all, watching as they disappeared from my device. But the emotional memory of them lingered. The grief, the guilt, the overwhelming need to go to her to save her. The knocking started again. But now it was coming from multiple sources, the blast door, the ventilation grates, the walls themselves, and beneath it I could hear breathing. Dozens of sources, all synchronized, all patient. I opened the facility log and made an entry in the same clinical format I'd seen in the 1983 records. Date, 30 Novi 2024. Incident: subject experienced manufactured memories and auditory hallucinations. Clear rule number 12 violation attempt. Subject resisted. Status: ongoing, pressure escalating. Manifestations increasing in specificity and psychological impact. Note: whatever is in the lower levels is adaptive, intelligent, and intimately familiar with human psychology. It doesn't just threaten, it offers, it promises, it knows what we want most. I set down my pen and waited for dawn, knowing that when my relief supervisor finally arrived, if they arrived, I would have to decide whether to warn them or simply leave, adding my own encrypted testimony to the long history of people who had encountered something in this place that refused to conform to any comfortable category of explanation. The breathing from the ventilation grates continued, patient, expectant, waiting. The blizzard hit on my 17th day at the facility, a wall of white that reduced visibility to less than 10 feet and drove the wind chill to -40. I watched it approach from the control station windows, a biblical manifestation that swallowed the horizon and turned afternoon into premature twilight. At 3:47 p.m., the perimeter alarm activated. I pulled up the external cameras, cycling through views that showed only white chaos. But camera 3, positioned at the main gate, caught a figure standing at the intercom post, hunched against the wind, one gloved hand pressed against the call button. I activated the intercom. "This is a restricted facility. State your business." The figure looked up at the camera, an old man, 70s at least, wearing a heavy parka that looked military surplus. His face was weathered, lined with decades of harsh climate, but his eyes were sharp, lucid, and deeply troubled. "My name is Walter Kozlov. I need to speak with whoever is currently stationed here. It's urgent." The accent was unmistakable, Russian, though his English was fluent. Something about his posture, the way he held himself despite the brutal wind, suggested military bearing. "Sir, you need to leave. This weather is dangerous. The nearest town—" "I know where the nearest town is. I was stationed here in 1992. I worked in this facility. I know what you're experiencing, and I know you won't believe me, but I have to try." He pulled something from his coat, a laminated ID card, which he held up to the camera. The photo showed a younger version of the same man, wearing the uniform of the Soviet Air Force. The card identified him as a liaison officer, part of some post-Cold War cooperation program I'd never heard of. I made a decision that violated protocol but felt necessary. "Wait there." I grabbed a heavy coat and made my way to the gate. The wind was a physical force trying to push me backward with every step. Kozlov was waiting where I'd seen him, his back to the wind, that ID card still in his gloved hand. "I'm not opening the gate," I shouted over the storm, "but I'm listening." He nodded, accepting this. When he spoke, he had to lean close to the intercom to be heard. How long have you been here? 17 days. Have you lost anyone yet? The question made my throat tighten. Yes. Then you understand. The Americans built on cursed ground. We tried to warn them in '92 when they invited Soviet observers as part of the disarmament verification protocols. But they didn't listen. They thought we were superstitious, that our concerns were propaganda. What concerns? The Dakota called this place where the dead speak. There are stories going back centuries about this valley, hunting parties that disappeared. Warriors who returned changed, speaking in voices not their own. The indigenous peoples avoided this area completely. Then in 1959, the Air Force began construction. They drilled deep, deeper than necessary for a standard Minuteman installation. The wind howled, and I thought I heard voices in it. Kozlov continued, his eyes never leaving mine. They found something. A cavity, a void in the rock that shouldn't have existed. Natural formation, they said. But the surveys showed geometry that was too regular, too precise. And the air that came out when they breached it. He paused, his breath fogging in the cold. It was warm, and it smelled of soil and copper. And every instrument they sent down stopped functioning at 847 feet. What was down there? We never learned. The Americans sealed it in 1984 after the incidents, but sealing isn't the same as destroying. And the thing they found, or that found them, it adapted, it learned. By 1992, when I was here, the rules had already evolved. 23 specific protocols designed not to protect the personnel, but to contain what was below. How do you know this? He pulled back his right glove. His hand was scarred, the tissue warped and discolored in patterns I recognized from cold burns. I violated rule number 16 in my 3rd week. I don't even remember what it was anymore. They change the numbering sometimes, add or remove entries based on observed behaviors. But I learned that the rules aren't for you. They're a cage, not for personnel, for it. What is it? Something old, something that predates the missiles, the facility, perhaps even the Dakota stories. Something that exists in the space between what we understand and what we refuse to believe. It feeds on violation, on the moment when a person chooses to break the rules. That's when it can reach through. The wind changed direction and I felt the temperature drop further. From inside the facility, I heard the faint sound of the launch klaxon beginning its wail. Kozlov heard it too. His expression tightened. The man you lost. He opened a door, and every violation weakens the cage further. The thing below is patient. It's been patient for decades, perhaps centuries, but it's getting stronger. Why are you here? Why now? Because I monitor the contractor rotations. I keep track from a distance, and I notice patterns. Your facility has had 3 complete turnovers in the past 18 months. Most contractors don't finish their first month. That's an escalation. Something is building. He reached into his coat again, pulling out a small Orthodox cross on a tarnished chain. He pressed it against the intercom camera, his scarred hand shaking. From cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. When it offers you what you want most, remember, the dead cannot give gifts. What they offer is only bait. The price is always the same. What price? You, all of you. It wants to break the cage completely. It wants to reach the surface. And every violation, every rule broken, every door open gives it more leverage. The launch klaxon you hear now? That's not equipment malfunction. That's a test. It's learning which sounds, which situations will make you investigate, make you descend, make you open the doors. The klaxon's wail intensified. Kozlov stepped back from the intercom, pulling his glove back on. You can't help what's already gone, but you can refuse to follow. Stay on the surface. Don't respond to voices. Don't trust memories that feel too perfect. And if the computer systems activate, if you see a launch sequence, don't try to stop it. The missiles are gone, but the sequence serves another purpose now. What purpose? The same as everything else in this place. To make you go down. To make you try to fix it. To make you open the final door. He turned to leave, then looked back one more time. There's a reason they keep hiring contractors. It's not about monitoring anymore. The facility itself is the cage. And you're not the guard. You're the bait. He walked into the white chaos of the storm and disappeared within seconds. I tried calling after him, but the wind swallowed my voice. When I checked the gate camera later, there were no footprints in the fresh snow. Just smooth, unbroken drifts as though no one had been there at all. I returned to the control station. The klaxon was still sounding, but I followed rule number 7. I remained in my quarters until it stopped, which took 4 hours and 16 minutes. During those 4 hours, I heard Jake's voice calling for help. I heard my ex-wife begging me to come down. I heard the voice of my CO from Kandahar telling me I'd left men behind, that they were still down there waiting for extraction. I didn't respond. I sat on my bed with Kozlov's words echoing in my mind. You're not the guard. You're the bait. When the klaxon finally stopped and silence returned, I found myself wondering about all the contractors who had come before me, who had lasted less than a month. What had they heard in their final moments? What doors had they opened? And more disturbingly, how many of them were still down there adding their voices to the chorus that called from the lower levels every night? I made coffee with shaking hands and watched the blizzard rage outside, thinking about cages and the things they contain and the terrible patience of something that has waited beneath the earth for longer than I could comprehend. The breathing from the ventilation grates continued, softer now, almost gentle. Waiting. Always waiting. My relief supervisor didn't arrive on schedule. Patricia called on the satellite phone 3 days after she was due, her voice tight with the kind of professional frustration that concealed deeper concern. Weather's still bad between here and there. Roads are closed. We're looking at another week, maybe 10 days before we can get someone to you. I can't stay here another week. You signed a contract, Mr. Chen, and the bonus for completion is substantial. Just follow the rules. That's all you have to do. Follow the rules and wait. She hung up before I could respond. 10 more days, alone, with whatever was in the lower levels growing more insistent each night. I began to understand the real purpose of the rules. They weren't safety protocols. They were a behavioral framework designed to keep you from investigating, from questioning, from trying to make sense of the impossible. They worked through enforcement of willful ignorance. Don't look, don't listen, don't respond, don't think too hard about what you're experiencing, obey, or suffer the consequences. But human beings aren't built for that kind of cognitive dissonance. We need to understand. We need causes for effects, explanations for phenomena, rational frameworks for our experiences. The rules demanded the opposite, that we accept impossibility and move on. It was psychological torture by another name. On my 21st night, I reached my breaking point. The knocking had become constant, no longer confined to post-10 p.m. hours. It came from the walls, the floors, the ceilings. 3 measured strikes, then silence, then 3 more. Sometimes it sounded like metal on metal, sometimes like bone on concrete, sometimes like something soft and wet desperately trying to get through. And the voices. God, the voices. They spoke through every surface. My ex-wife begging me to save our daughter. My mother, dead 6 years, telling me she was proud of me. My battle buddy from Afghanistan, the one who died when our convoy hit an IED, asking why I'd left him behind. And new voices. Jake, screaming my name, begging me to come down, telling me he was still alive, still trapped. still suffering in the darkness. I knew they were lies. I knew rule number 12. But knowing didn't make them easier to ignore. At 11:37 p.m., the voice changed tactics. It came through the ventilation grate in my quarters, but this time it wasn't anyone I knew. It was a child's voice, young, frightened, sobbing. "Please help me, I'm scared. It's dark down here and I can't find my mom. Please, I heard someone up there. Please help me." I stood beneath the grate, fists clenched, every parental instinct I'd never had the chance to develop screaming at me to respond. "My name is Emily. I'm 7 years old. I came here with my mom, but we got separated. Please, can you hear me? I'm on level 5. I can see a light. Please come get me." Emily, the daughter who had never existed, whose manufactured memories had been planted in my mind days earlier. But now she was real, or at least the voice was real, sobbing and terrified and alone in the darkness. The voice cracked with desperation. "Please, it's getting closer. I can hear it moving. Please, I'm so scared. Please help me." I grabbed my jacket, my flashlight, my key card. I was halfway to the door when I stopped. I forced myself to pull out my phone to open the Photos app. Empty. The fabricated images of Emily were gone, deleted days ago. I opened my contacts. I called my ex-wife. It was late, but she answered. "Marcus, again, do I have a daughter? Any daughter, ever?" "What?" "No, Jesus, Marcus, we've been over this. What's happening to you?" "If I had a daughter, what would her name be? If we'd had kids, what would we have named her?" A long pause. "We talked about Sophie, after your grandmother. But Marcus, we never had children. You know this. Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "Sophie, not Emily." The voice from the grate let out a wail of pure terror. "Please, it's here. It's touching me. Help me, help me." I ended the call. I stood in my quarters, shaking, the screaming from the ventilation grate escalating to unbearable intensity. Then abruptly it stopped. The silence was worse than the screaming. I checked my phone again and my blood went cold. My photo gallery had repopulated, hundreds of images of a little girl named Emily, at the beach, at Christmas, at her 7th birthday party. In all of them, she was looking directly at the camera with eyes that held something ancient and hungry behind their childlike surface. And in the most recent image, she was standing in darkness, her face pale, her hand reaching toward the camera. The metadata showed it had been taken 3 minutes ago at 11:42 p.m. Location, level 5, this facility. I deleted the photos again, but they reappeared instantly. I tried to power off my phone, but it wouldn't respond. The screen cycled through image after image. Emily smiling, Emily crying, Emily covered in blood, Emily's face distorting into something that wasn't human at all. Then my phone displayed a text message from no number, no contact, just blank sender information. "She's waiting for you. We're all waiting for you. Come down where you belong." A second message appeared. "You left us behind. In Kandahar, in Colorado. Here. You always leave us behind. Come down and finally stay." A third message, and this one made my hands shake so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "We know about the eval. We know what you did. We know why they discharged you. Come down and confess. Come down and atone. Come down and finally end it." The facility's lights died, every single one simultaneously. The emergency backups didn't activate. I was in absolute perfect darkness. My flashlight flickered on without me touching it, its beam illuminating the door to my quarters. And in that beam, I saw them, figures, dozens of them. Standing in the corridor outside, visible through the narrow window in my door. Men and women in Air Force uniforms from different eras, 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Their heads were at wrong angles. Their eyes reflected my flashlight beam. And in the front, a little girl in a purple dress. Emily. Her head tilted, her smile too wide, her hand extended in invitation. The voice came from everywhere at once. "Come down, Marcus. Your daughter is waiting, your friends are waiting, your truth is waiting. All you have to do is open the door and descend. All you have to do is stop fighting and accept what you know is real." My hand was on my keycard. I was walking toward the door, my body moving without conscious decision. The need to confess, to atone, to finally accept responsibility for things I'd done and things I'd failed to do was overwhelming. Down there in the darkness, I could finally lay down my burden. The lock disengaged. The door began to open. Through the gap, cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of earth and copper and something else, something organic and ancient and utterly wrong. Emily's hand reached through the opening, her fingers impossibly long, her skin gray, her nails black. At the last second, some core part of me that had survived Kandahar and the psych-eval and the dissolution of everything I'd built reasserted itself. I slammed the door shut, engaged the lock, and wedged my desk against it. The lights came back on instantly, the figures were gone. But I could hear them on the other side of the door, breathing in perfect synchronization, patient as stone. I checked my phone. The photos were gone. The messages were gone. But the memory of them remained, crystal clear and utterly undeniable. I spent the rest of the night sitting with my back against the door, feeling periodic impacts as something on the other side tested its strength. Not violent, just persistent. A reminder that the door wasn't really a barrier, just a courtesy, a rule I was being allowed to maintain. For now. At dawn, I checked the blast door to the lower levels. Through its observation window, I saw the landing was empty. But someone had written on the wall in what looked like frost, in letters 3 feet high, "Descend beneath it," in smaller script, "Or we'll make you." My 24th night began like all the others, with watching the clock count down to 10:47 p.m. and the inevitable knocking. But at 9:17 p.m. something changed. Every monitor in the control station activated simultaneously. They'd been dead for days, showing only static or blank screens. Now they blazed to life with impossible clarity, each displaying a different view of the lower levels. Level 2. The corridor where Jake had disappeared now filled with standing water that rippled despite the absence of any current. Level 3. A technical station. Its equipment running despite the facility being supposedly offline, screens showing targeting data that scrolled past faster than human eyes could process. Level 4. The missile operations level, empty except for a single figure standing in the center of the room facing the camera. It wore an Air Force uniform from the 1960s. Its head was bent at an angle that suggested a broken neck. Level 5. The missile tube itself, the massive reinforced cylinder that should have been empty. Instead, it was filled with water. Impossible, given that we were hundreds of feet above the water table. And in that water, I could see things moving. Shapes that were almost human, writhing and reaching upward. But the worst feed was from a camera that shouldn't exist. The label read, Level 8 Containment. It showed a chamber carved from raw stone, far larger than anything that should fit in the facility's footprint. The walls were covered in markings I didn't recognize. Not Lakota, not Cyrillic, not any language I'd ever encountered. They seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, writhing and reconfiguring. And in the center of that chamber, something waited. I can't describe it accurately. My mind kept trying to interpret it as familiar things. A collapsed ventilation shaft, a pile of equipment, a shadow cast by inadequate lighting. But none of those interpretations held. It was organic and geometric simultaneously. It was still and moving. It was there and not there. And it was looking at me through the camera. At 9:43 p.m., the facility's main computer activated. This was the primary control system, a relic from the 1960s that supposedly hadn't functioned since 1997. Its monitors glowed amber, casting the control room in sickly light. Text appeared on the largest screen. Launch sequence initiated authorization. Automated target coordinates locked. T-minus 15 to 15 minutes. The countdown began, numerals ticking backward with steady precision. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. Rule number 19 was explicit. If the launch sequence initiates, evacuate immediately. Do not attempt manual abort. But the missiles had been removed decades ago. There was nothing to launch. This had to be a system malfunction, some ghost in the ancient circuitry. If I evacuated, I'd be abandoning the facility for no reason, probably triggering a response that would end my contract and raise questions about my mental stability. The countdown continued. 14:23, 14:22, 14:21. I approached the main computer, my hands hovering over the keyboard. The abort sequence was standard across all Minuteman installations. I'd memorized it during training years ago. Just a few keystrokes would stop this. The surveillance monitors changed. Now they all showed the same thing. Me, from multiple angles, standing at the computer. But in these feeds, I was surrounded by those figures in outdated uniforms. They stood behind me, around me, their heads at impossible angles, their mouths moving in perfect synchronization. I couldn't hear them, but I could read their lips. They were all saying the same thing. Abort it. You have to abort it. You can't let it launch. The countdown: 12:47, 12:46, 12:45. My training screamed at me. A launch sequence was the ultimate threat, the scenario every Minuteman operator was drilled to prevent at all costs. The abort procedure was muscle memory, ingrained through countless exercises and simulations. My hands moved toward the keyboard. Walter Kozlov's voice echoed in my memory. The missiles are gone, but the sequence serves another purpose now. To make you go down, to make you try to fix it, to make you open the final door. I pulled my hands back. The figures on the monitors became agitated, their mouths moving faster, their expressions shifting to panic, to rage. The countdown: 9:15, 9:14, 9:13. Every instinct I'd developed through years of military service demanded that I act. Every horror story about nuclear close calls, every training scenario about unauthorized launches, every nightmare about being the person who could have stopped it but didn't. All of it converged in this moment. And that's when I understood. This was the final test. Not of my competence, but of my willingness to trust something that made no sense, to follow a rule that contradicted everything I'd been trained to do. The launch klaxon activated, its wail splitting the air. The countdown: 6:42, 6:41, 6:40. The blast door to the lower levels unlocked itself, the wheel lock spun without being touched, and the massive door swung slowly inward. Cold air rushed out, carrying that scent of earth and copper, an ancient, patient hunger. The computer screen changed. Manual abort required, proceed to level 7. Launch control authorization code required at terminal. A map appeared, showing the route from my position to a terminal on level 7. The unauthorized level, the sealed level, the level that had been filled with concrete in 1984. Except it couldn't be filled with concrete if there was a functioning terminal down there. The countdown: 3:58, 3:57, 3:56. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and ran for my vehicle. Behind me, the computer screen displayed a final message: coward, failure, murderer. The figures from the surveillance feeds were suddenly visible in the physical space, crowding the corridors, reaching for me as I ran. I felt their fingers brush my jacket, cold as grave earth. I heard their voices, now audible, screaming accusations and pleas and threats. I made it to my truck, turned the ignition with shaking hands, and floored the accelerator. The vehicle fishtailed on ice but gained traction. In the rearview mirror, I saw the facility's lights beginning to fail, dying one by one from the bottom up. The countdown must have reached 0 because at that moment, the entire facility shook. Not an explosion. Something worse. A sound came from the depths, a vibration that I felt in my bones rather than heard with my ears. It was like the earth itself was screaming. The road ahead was barely visible through snow and darkness, but I kept my foot down, putting distance between myself and the facility. My truck's rear window cracked, not from impact, but from cold so intense it shattered the glass. The temperature gauge dropped from 15 degrees to 40 degrees in seconds. In my rearview mirror, I saw something rising from the facility. Not smoke, not steam. Something that moved against the wind, that seemed to pull darkness in around itself. It rose from where the missile silo would be, a column of wrongness that spread outward like infection. I drove for 3 hours straight, not stopping until I reached Minot. Only when I was parked under streetlights, surrounded by normal buildings and normal people going about their normal lives, did I allow myself to look back. The horizon in the direction of the facility glowed with a sickly green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. My phone rang. Patricia. Mr. Chen, I've been informed of your early departure. We need to debrief. Something came out. Something rose from the lower levels. You need to send a team. A team has already been dispatched. They're reporting structural failure consistent with extreme weather conditions. The facility has been declared unsafe for habitation. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive your full compensation plus a completion bonus. And you'll sign an NDA. Tonight, I'm sending the documents now. Patricia, listen to me. Jake is down there. And there are others. Mr. Chen, the investigation found contractor Severson's body 3 miles from the facility. Death by exposure. Tragic but explainable. There's nothing else to find. Do you understand? There's nothing else to find and nothing else to discuss. The call ended. Within minutes, my phone received a document package. The NDA was comprehensive, threatening both criminal prosecution and civil liability for any disclosure of facility details, events, or experiences. The compensation attached made it clear this was serious money, enough to start over, to disappear, to forget. I signed it in a hotel parking lot at 3 a.m., my hands still shaking from cold and adrenaline and the memory of what I'd seen rising from the earth. The official investigation took 6 weeks. I wasn't part of it. Patricia had arranged for me to stay at a corporate apartment in Minneapolis, far from the facility, far from anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. A company psychologist visited 3 times, documenting my adjustment challenges with clinical detachment. Jake's autopsy was completed and released to his family. I obtained a copy through channels I'd rather not detail. The official cause of death was exposure, as Patricia had stated, but the full report contained details that weren't in the summary. Severe hypothermia consistent with prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures. Time of death estimated at 300 hours on November 27th. Notable anomalies: victim's core body temperature at discovery measured 43 degrees Fahrenheit, significantly below typical post-mortem temperature. Multiple bone fractures consistent with impact from significant height, though no elevated structures in immediate vicinity. Stomach contents include substance resembling soil, approximately 400 millimolar volume. Toxicology negative for alcohol and controlled substances. The anomalies were listed, then ignored. The conclusion remained: death by exposure. Case closed. The facility itself was officially sealed on January 15th. According to the press release, structural assessments revealed extensive weather-related damage to critical support systems, rendering continued operations unsafe and economically unfeasible. The site would be mothballed indefinitely with periodic remote monitoring. I tried to move on. I found work doing security consulting for a firm in Denver, far from frozen plains and missile silos. I attended therapy, I took the medication they prescribed for anxiety and insomnia. I told myself that what I'd experienced was explicable. Isolation, stress, residual combat trauma manifesting as hallucinations. But some nights I still heard the knocking. 3 measured strikes, then silence, then 3 more. And some nights I dreamed of the chamber on level 8, with its writhing symbols and the thing that waited there, patient and hungry and now partially free. 3 months after leaving the facility, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Chen?" A woman's voice, young, professional. "My name is Sarah Reeves. I'm calling about a security position. Your name was provided as a reference by Patricia Chambers." "I don't do references. Patricia knows that." "Oh, this isn't exactly a reference call. I've been offered a contract position monitoring a decommissioned government facility. 6 months, isolated location, very generous compensation. Patricia suggested I speak with you first. She said you'd completed a similar assignment and might have advice." My mouth went dry. "What facility?" "It's a former Atlas missile installation outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. Apparently it's been abandoned since the 90s, but they need someone to monitor it while they decide what to do with the site." It seems straightforward, but Patricia mentioned there are specific protocols, rules I need to follow. She thought you might help me understand why they're so important. I looked at my laptop, opened a browser, and searched for decommissioned missile installations in Wyoming. The results appeared instantly. I recognized the designation code. I remembered seeing it in the classified documents I'd found at the North Dakota facility, listed as a sister site with similar operational parameters. "Ms. Reeves, don't take that job." "I'm sorry?" "The facility isn't what they're telling you. The rules aren't safety protocols, and the isolation isn't just geography. It's designed to make you vulnerable. Don't take the job. Find something else. Anything else." A long pause. "Mr. Chen, Patricia said you might react this way. She mentioned you had a difficult experience, but that you'd completed your contract successfully. She said the compensation helped you start over. Is that not true?" The money had helped. It was still helping. It had given me options, stability, a chance to rebuild, but it hadn't bought silence from my conscience. Everything Patricia told you is technically true, but there are truths that matter more. That facility cost me things I can't get back, and it cost Jake Severson his life. Don't make the same mistake we did." "Jake Severson? I don't..." "Wait. Was he the contractor who died?" Patricia mentioned there had been an accident, but that it was unrelated to the facility itself. "Exposure," she said. "That's what the report says, but I was there. I saw what happened to him. And if you go to Wyoming, you'll see things too. Things you won't be able to explain or forget or rationalize away." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. The job starts next week. I just thought I wanted to understand the rules better. Patricia said they were important. Follow them exactly, every single one. Don't test them, don't question them. Don't try to be clever or brave. Just follow them, finish your rotation, take your money, and leave." "Okay, thank you. That's actually helpful." "Ms. Reeves, one more thing. If you hear voices claiming to be people you know, people you love, they're not. No matter how convincing they are, no matter what they know or what they promise, they're not real. That's a very specific warning. It's the most important one." She thanked me and ended the call. I sat in my apartment looking at the screen still showing information about the Wyoming facility. The photos showed the same brutal architecture, the same isolated location, the same sense of something waiting just out of frame. I pulled up a satellite map and zoomed in on the North Dakota site. The surface structures were visible, dormant and dark. But as I watched, and I know this sounds impossible, One of the surface lights flickered on, just for a moment, just long enough to suggest that despite the official closure, despite the structural condemnation, despite everything, the facility wasn't truly abandoned. Something was still there, still monitoring, still waiting. I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, knowing I wouldn't. Instead, I lay in darkness, listening to the city sounds outside my window, traffic, voices, the comfortable noise of human civilization, and tried not to hear the other sounds underneath them. The knocking, the breathing, the patient, inevitable sounds of something that had been contained for decades but was now learning, adapting, and slowly breaking free. 6 months later, I saw a news report about a contractor found dead near a decommissioned facility in Wyoming. Official cause: exposure. The report mentioned that the facility would be sealed permanently following the incident. I tried to find information about Sarah Reeves. Her social media profiles had been deleted. Her employment history showed a gap of exactly 6 months, then nothing. I wanted to believe she'd survived, taken her money, and disappeared like I had. But I knew the truth. I'd heard it in her voice during that phone call, the same confidence Jake had shown, the same certainty that rules were just bureaucratic theater, that understanding and caution would be enough. They never were. The missile silo outside Minot, North Dakota, remains officially abandoned. Structural condemnation reports from January 2025 declared it unsafe for human occupation. Satellite imagery shows a deteriorating facility, its surface structures slowly being reclaimed by the prairie winter after winter. But if you access the right databases, if you have the right clearances, you'll find something interesting. Thermal imaging satellites occasionally detect heat signatures from the lower levels. Power consumption records show irregular spikes despite the facility being disconnected from the grid. And seismic monitors detect vibrations at regular intervals, a rhythmic pulse that matches no known geological or mechanical source. The facility is not as abandoned as official records suggest. Every winter, new contractors are hired. The job postings are carefully worded, targeting individuals who need isolation, who have something to run from, who won't ask too many questions about why the compensation is so generous. Most don't finish their first month. The personnel records are classified, but the pattern is clear. Contractors arrive. Incidents occur. Some leave early like I did, signing their NDAs and disappearing into new lives built on silence. Others aren't so lucky. The exposure deaths continue, 1 or 2 each year, always ruled accidental, always explained away. But the facility remains operational in some capacity. The rules are updated periodically, now numbering 27 entries, adapted based on what Patricia called observed behaviors. And somewhere on level 8, in a chamber that officially doesn't exist, something waits with the patience of stone and the hunger of ages. It's learning from every contractor who violates the rules. It's testing the cage with every incident, every breach, every moment of weakness when human curiosity or compassion or desperation override caution. The cage is weakening. Everyone involved knows this, though no one will say it aloud. One day, probably soon, a contractor will make the final mistake. They'll open the final door, break the final rule, and the thing that the Dakota called "where the dead speak" will complete what it started when the first drill bit punctured the stone in 1959. Until then, the facility continues its real purpose, not monitoring abandoned military hardware, but containing something that cannot be destroyed, only delayed. And every contractor is part of that delay, bait and guard and sacrifice, whether they know it or not. The lights flicker in the underground levels, and every winter they hire someone new,